only God can save us now. And you have a number of tweets that are like this imminent prediction, this harbinger, a warning that something is going to take place and that China is going to move the needle. I feel it too. I really do. With everything that I've read and just watching. And if it is in China's best interest to have Biden in office, and if a part of their calculus is that this assassination attempt on Donald Trump is actually galvanizing the country, why would they wait to see what happens, or versus triggering something now to get a different result than Donald Trump?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I think that they realized that they could have the decisive vote in this 2024 election, as they had a decisive vote in 2020. I mean, in 2020, just go back to show their mentality. They were very helpful to Joe Biden over Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary.
How?
And a lot of propaganda and a lot of money going into the Biden campaign. And they did the same thing.
But a foreign government cannot contribute to a U.S. campaign.
Yeah, and neither may foreign nationals. But they did it anyway. What they did was they funneled a lot of small contributions through Act Blue, which is the Democratic Party website. And I'm sure that they use...
not directly to the candidate himself, but to a PAC that supports the cause of the Democrat Party.
Yes, and they did it through foreign sources. They did it through small donations, which are very difficult to trace. And so they were very successful. And of course, they were successful in disrupting President Trump's reelection campaign in 2020. So we saw all sorts of dirty tricks. They used TikTok for this purpose and other venues. So really what they did was an all-out campaign, and they were very successful. If you go back to February 2020, remember everyone was saying that President Trump was a shoo-in for re-election.
Yes.
But China had a vote, and so they changed it. Going forward to 2024, they could do a couple things. As I mentioned, no wartime U.S. president has ever lost re-election. So they could start a war. If they feel that they're not ready to do that, and that's a real possibility, they could try to do things to bolster U.S.-China relations, make it look more friendly, try to give the credit to Biden. Mm-hmm. So they could go either way on that. But, another thing we got to remember, and that is that I think that Xi Jinping, although, of course, he keeps an eye on the U.S. presidential election and other things, right now, I think that he is primarily driven by domestic incentives. And one could make an argument that he's driven almost solely by domestic incentives. And if that's the case, then he could do something between now and November 5. He may have no thinking at all about how it'll affect our presidential contest, but he may do it because he has to protect his own position in Beijing.
And so what's happening when you say if he's solely focused on domestic events? What are those domestic events that has him up in arms?
He has a deteriorating economy, and it is. They've
had that now for well over 4 years.
Yes, they had it during COVID, but everyone sort of gave the Chinese a pass, saying, "Oh, well, it was just COVID." But the problem for Xi Jinping right now is that the Chinese economy has not recovered post-COVID to the extent everybody thought. Mm-hmm. China right now, just on Monday, reported 4.7% growth for the second quarter of this year. That's a gross overstatement of how they did, but it's certainly less than the 5.3% that they claimed for the first quarter. Right. The Chinese people right now are not spending. They're not buying homes to a great extent. They are not going to the stores like they once did. They're just not optimistic. And that means the Chinese economy is probably, if it's growing at maybe 1%. But, if it were growing at the 4.7% pace that they claim, it would not be growing fast enough to pay back the debt that they've accumulated, especially since 2008. So China has right now, it's hitting a wall. And Xi Jinping knows, because he has grabbed almost absolute power, that he has very few other people to blame, which means that he's got total or near total accountability, which means he's got a situation which he can't deal with, this eroding economy. Matter of fact, his proposals for dealing with the Chinese economy are making things worse.
Mm-hmm.
So he
And
needs to
so
do something.
and so your thinking is that if he triggers a war or anything, that it could be less about what's going on in America and his power grab for world domination, but more so because he's wanting to distract the people, the Chinese people.
One other thing, I wouldn't say it's so much trying to distract the Chinese people. I think what he's trying to do is make it virtually impossible for senior figures in Beijing to depose him.
Hmm.
Remember, the Chinese people are oppressed. And right now, I don't think that a war would be popular among Chinese people, especially a war against
So he
Taiwan.
has no consideration for his own people, which of course aligns with his ruling um, to date. So he's really just focused on what his senior cabinet, what their mindset is, and how to keep them busy on anything other than his seat of power.
Yeah, absolutely. It's elite politics, and he wants to make sure that the people who are closest to him, highest up in the Communist Party, can't move against